When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite, looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Warning, creators of this game do understand the subject matter may be offensive to some, but they do honor the families and people that have been affected by these real-life tragedies that these individuals have caused. Want to play a game?
Oh, yeah!
Lover of true crime?
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, we got an interesting game for you to check out.
Wow.
With the mashup of influences such as horror movies, collecting cards, and RPGs.
What?
Led to giving birth to an incredible creation of this game, Killers, the card game.
You are all my children now.
This game is a collectible trading card game featuring some of the most infamous killers, with tidbits of trivia on the back of each card to help you learn some insight to each criminal.
Who the hell are you?
Let's not forget, during the game, cops will be chasing you and these criminals.
I'm a cop, you idiot!
However, check out their website listed through all social media today, which can be found under Killers, the card game.
Am I on the internet?
I want to play a game.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Jon Finkel, and you are listening to Crazy Train Radio.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this next guest is a well-established author and writer, as he has written for Men's Health, Men's Fitness, has had stuff published by the New York Times, GQ, Yahoo Sports, and many, many more. He has multiple books out, but today the main focus is on his new book with ECW Press, Macho Man, The Untamed, Unbelievable Life of Randy Savage.
Oh, yeah!
So, he is the author of Macho Man, Untamed, Unbelievable Life of Randy Savage. Coming out in April officially. You can pre-order on Amazon, all that fun stuff. So, Mr. Finkel.
Yes.
What was it obviously like putting this project together? Because there's a lot of material that was there already before the book was written.
Um, what kind of material do you mean?
Well, I'm just saying, as far as there was a lot out there about Randy, you had biographies, you had DVDs, fans who follow the business are aware of, from Slim Jim to baseball to acting to, so there was just a lot of content there. So I guess I should ask it this way. How did you decide on which direction to take the book?
Yeah, that's kind of, this is my 10th book. I've done a lot of biographies, a lot of larger sports books that are of this scope with, 100,000 words, 300 something pages. You kind of have an outline. Obviously I grew up at the perfect time of being a fan of Macho Man. So I had that perspective of being, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 during his kind of early peak WWF back then run. And then you just start hitting the ground running with interviews, right? So I knew, I think that a lot of people I found writing the book for over, a year and a half, most people, maybe the hardcore fans have like a passing understanding that he played a little baseball, but at least 50% had no idea that that was something he did beforehand. I would say of the millions and millions of people who would say they grew up loving watching Macho Man and Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan and all that, almost other than like the diehard, like real wrestling crew, most people didn't know anything about, the ICW years and Lawler or any of that kind of stuff, in Kentucky. And so a lot of people's first time they heard of Macho Man was in the the then WWF. So for me, part of my job was like, okay, so we've got, I don't know, a generation of millions of people who grew up essentially like impersonating him, watching him, the Saturday morning cartoons, watching the feud with Hogan, watching all the WrestleManias, watching the Steamboat match, watching the Ric Flair match, all that stuff. But the idea was really like, what don't they know, right? I know there's a 5 or 10% contingent of diehard fans who would be like, oh, I knew he would play for Pete Rose. I knew he played with Pete Rose in the Reds, and I knew he was in the Tampa minor leagues, but most didn't, right? So I really wanted to make sure that for that nostalgia hit where these books were taking you back to your childhood, you really get to know the man, you get to know what's behind him, the transition from Randy Poffo to Randy Savage to Macho Man was for me the spine of the book, because I would venture to say that a vast majority of fans who aren't that hardcore knew nothing about Randy Poffo or even the mid-level Randy Savage. They just knew WrestleMania 3 on basically.
And I don't know the timing of the research and such, but obviously I knew for several years his brother Lanny. Did you have an opportunity to talk to Lanny before his passing?
Oh yeah. I dedicate the book to Lanny. The intro, I talk about how he passed away midway through writing it. So one of the things about this book was, as an author, you always have like bucket list books you want to write throughout your career, and I had always wanted to tackle this book. I just always felt like I couldn't believe there was no. You mentioned earlier there actually is no definitive Macho Man biography out there. There's like nothing. It's really amazing actually that there hasn't been one, and I was kind of very happy that there wasn't. There was a couple biography like documentaries out there, but they're all very flawed, most of them, using heavily relying on like 3 or 4 major talents that people would listen to draw the audience, but painting almost no picture of Randy Savage himself becoming who he did with Macho Man, and what drove him and what motivated him and why he molded himself into the man that he did. And so as you're like looking at all these kind of things and trying to figure out what you want to put in the book, that's when you really have to decide like, how am I gonna tackle this project, and how am I going to cover what's not there.
And it's funny, and I mentioned the amount of material out there, and I guess you would consider me one of the hardcore, that 5-10%, whatever the case is. And not only knowing Lanny, but just in general with the knowledge of the factual versus the myths, because I forget which one it was of the biographies, whether it was the Vice one or the A&E, I can't remember, because it all meshes together.
Yeah.
I think there's one of them, why I brought that up is there is, how do you put it? Some people who were on there that had no true relationship or didn't know Randy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But as far as the amount of information, you can have a couple encyclopedias, I think.
Oh
of the
yeah.
factual information with
Yeah, well,
or
that was why it was so
Randy.
important to me. I had the book proposal done, and I had a couple publishers interested, but I had an internal kind of stop sign. If I don't get Lanny to talk to me about this, I wasn't going to do the book. I didn't feel like it could be done properly without having Lanny as, a source. He wasn't involved contractually, he wasn't all that, just someone who I could talk to and who would kind of, by being involved, at least give me my own personal internal blessing that like this is something that he would be proud of and I would be proud of. So it took about a year to finally get in touch with him. A friend of mine through another book that I'd done, JP Zarka, who runs that awesome pro wrestling stories
Yes,
site.
I know JP.
He's an awesome dude, and I had interviewed him for my book 1996, which was the book I did before this. And he had done a few podcasts with Lanny over the years and a couple things on Facebook with him. And I was able to, he was just awesome. He kind of vouched for me with Lanny, and eventually, Lanny lived in Ecuador, and no phone calls. It was through some, we talked through some weird like Telegram phone thing, like on my phone. But anyway, we finally spoke, and the first question he asked me was, my last name's Finkel, was I related to Howard Finkel? And I said no, but my dad's Harvey Finkel, and so maybe the same initials, maybe there's some there connection there. And he laughed, and then kind of hit me with some macho questions, about Randy and his early life, and just kind of see maybe, I guess, if I'd had the chops or had done my research before talking to him, and after that year of time I'd had. And then we talked for like 2.5 hours. I mean, I had my list ready in case that was the only time I knew how hard he was to get a hold of. And he was like, well, what do you want to talk about? I said, look, I have like 100 things. If now's the time, great. If you want to set up another time. And he was like, let's go. And we just went. And he said he was happy. I was getting into it and coming at it. I explained basically just like I did to you, why I would want to do it, why me, why I thought I should be the one, why now is the time, what I wanted to do with it. And I did tell him exactly, like, I want to take readers from, Angelo Paffo's background to growing up as that, as in that environment, to Randy Poffo as baseball player, to Randy Savage, the wrestler, kind of making his way in the territories, to the Macho Man that everybody knew. And he really dug that. And then, yeah, I had a list of questions that I kind of kept running tab while I was writing over, 4, 5, 6 months in the middle of it. And then, yeah, JP actually was one who texted me and told me that Lanny had passed. And I knew how beloved he was throughout wrestling and throughout his own community. So I won't pretend to have like a special relationship with him, but it really bummed me out. He was when I would text him, or not text him, like, text him through, I think it was Telegram. You may know. I don't remember which one he used, but it was some random app. Yeah.
And that totally sounds like Lanny, by the way, how he would go with the oddball.
Clandestine. Yeah, it wasn't easy. He had no phone.
That totally sounds like him.
So I would write him stuff, and he would write back. It may be 3 weeks later, and then, like I said, I had this list next to me, Lanny Q's, I called them, and we got through most, but every now and then I talked to almost Randy's entire high school baseball team, their wrestling coach, their baseball coach. So I really, really went deep. And so sometimes there's a clarification on where did you guys live when you were in Cleveland for 6 months, or small stuff like that. What does your apartment look like when you guys were doing this, or whatever. But yeah, so having him involved was critical to the project. I really would not have done it had he not said, like, I'll be available for some interviews. And then it bums me out that he didn't get to see the final product. I really think this is the most evenly balanced, but also appreciating how much Randy meant to so many of us, book that will ever be done. Hopefully this is the one. This is the definitive Macho Man book.
And the thing that disappoints me about Randy's passing, and I mean this respectfully, but the way he passed with the heart attack and in the car, and it so seems like a Macho Man way. If I'm gonna go, this is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it so seems like the Macho Man in that aspect. But the thing that disappoints me was it was actually my sister's birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, on May 20th. But that he didn't get to see the Hall of Fame and things like that.
Yeah, my last chapter is called Serenity, because it had felt like, I wrote the book, you can't write it in chronological order, because you never know how many, I could get a great interview lined up from someone who's going to be at the end of the book. In fact, one of the first interviews I was able to do when I started my research, I took my daughter along with me. I live in South Florida, so we drove up to Tampa, where he spent a lot of his career and a lot of his life. And we actually drove to the tree that he hit with, with his Jeep. It's now like a de facto Macho Man memorial. There's
Hmm.
even to this day, almost 15 years later, there's Macho Man action figures on the base of the tree. There's Slim Jim wrappers. There's purple tassels. There's sunglasses stickers. It's really quite sweet and remarkable after all this time. But one of the first interviews I did was the man who owned the house of the property that was on, right? And like what that day was like, and how visible Macho had been in the community, and how it was a real hit to the community. He'd secluded himself he bought a really big house in about an acre off, but that was towards the very, very end of his life. Prior to that, he lived on a high rise on the beach, and people would shout from the sand, Macho, and he would wave and yell. He was very much a part of the community. It wasn't a big deal to see him out. He would go to Waffle House or his favorite breakfast place, and he was around. And
Yeah.
he had reconnected with a previous love in his life from 30 years earlier, who wasn't with him for any of his career, any of his really anything beyond being like 22 to like 50. Um, and he had reconnected with Hogan, and he had reconnected at least one level with the WWE that we know with the action figures. It seemed like there was a wave cresting for like a big comeback, like the comeback he deserved, welcoming him back into the WWE. I agree with you. It's sad we were robbed of all that.
And as far as being involved with the community, and I know for a fact it wasn't for, hey, look at me and look at me,
Mm-mm.
but I know a special thing for him was the Special Olympics,
Yep.
but obviously did more charity work as well.
He did a lot of charity work. The thing that there's a bunch of themes in the book when you interview hundreds of people, and one of the biggest ones is how just phenomenal he was with kids, just over and
Mhm.
over. Wrestling's, the wrestlers who had kids, any kids he saw on the street, any kids who wanted to, play basketball with him if he was, whatever he was doing. And then in the Tampa area in particular, he did the night before Christmas for George Steinbrenner's Children's Hospital, the
Mhm.
function that he did. He read the night before Christmas in the Macho Man voice for 15, 16 years. And I spoke with one of the guys who worked for the Yankees who helped set that up. And it was like they asked him to do it one year, and then he's just said, anytime you need me. And it just became an annual thing. And he was very close to the Steinbergers, very close to the hospital. And I guess some of the people they had prior to him, they would do their little speech and kind of leave. And he stayed every year all the way through the whole time, making sure he shook every kid's hand, making sure every kid got the gift basket they were supposed to get, and a little time with Macho Man. And so it's funny to see because he never had any kids of his own. But he was, from what Lanny said, like he wanted to be involved as an uncle to the extent that he could be with Lanny's kids. And then just an awesome. There's a lot of awesome stories in here of Randy being surprisingly like gentle, even from some of the wrestlers. I talked to Paul Orndorff's son, who was like, the only wrestler who gave me the time of day was Randy Savage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And something tells me because of hearing all those stories and stuff and being a great uncle to Lanny's daughter, he would have been a good father himself, I think. Something says he
Yeah.
would have.
He made as a joke. I think it was. There's so many interviews, but I'm pretty sure it was Paul Roma was telling me that like he was always great to Paul's kids as he ran into him, not when they were wrestling, but older, later years. Paul left and had kids, and he was saying that like, what do you do? It was when he was with Elizabeth, and he's like, you got to get these kids away. Elizabeth wants to have kids, and he was making a joke about,
Yeah.
I'm good with kids. Like obviously, like I'd be a good dad. I think the only thing, obviously, that made kept them from that was his career was not, and that was it. He was obsessive compulsive, and I think obviously just because of how close he was to his own parents, you could imagine that if somehow he had had a child, he would have been amazing. I think, but I think there was just no way to balance that when he finally got the title and he finally got where he was going to be in his 30s. He was not going to relinquish that for kids. At least I don't think. And maybe he would have been one of those guys who, like Derek Jeter, right, has has kids in his 40s after his career, but he just wasn't ever going to not be Macho Man until his body wouldn't let him, which is basically what happened.
Yeah.
And he couldn't wrestle anymore. He was going to be out there doing it.
Biggest thing that surprised you about when you were digging into the research?
The biggest thing really was the turn that he made from baseball to wrestling. I can't emphasize enough how much his baseball career informed his wrestling career. There is no, I don't believe he would have done any of the things he'd done if he hadn't had the baseball career flame out. Not in even a negative way. I mean, a lot of careers do. But if he had lived his original dream, we never would have heard of the Macho Man. There would have been Randy Poffo, 280 hitter for the Cincinnati Reds, right? Like catcher, first baseman for maybe 6 or 8 years. That would have been it. So in one way, that is a big issue. In another way, the fact that he was able, I mean, we all have our hopes and dreams as we go through, and he got tantalizingly close. I mean, he was in high A ball and had some great years. He led the league in home runs one year, tied Eddie Murray, who was a big Orioles, like eventually went, played the Orioles Hall of Famer. Like he got up there as his idol with Pete Rose and the Reds. He got to play with those guys. Like he was like tasting his career going up there. And one of the things that happened when he was getting close was he hurt his right shoulder on a collision at home plate. And for most minor league ball players, that's all she wrote. That's your career unless you recover from it. And this is one of my favorite sections of the book and of research is Randy decided, well, I have 2 arms. And he taught himself over just an excruciating period to throw lefty, like a passable lefty from catcher to first ball, or possibly from first to second or third if he was going to move to first base. And that was how bad he wanted it. And so to your original part of the question, the thing that surprised me most was his ability to take, and I don't know many people who have, you take all of that time and energy into one thing that is all he dreamed about. When you read the book, high school, making the team, making the pros, and the minute it was finally over, the third time he made it all the way to the final cuts and just didn't have it anymore. He went home. There's a very theatrical scene. He drove all the way home, smashed all of his, literally, I mean, this is a man who brought his bats through 4 years of high school. He had his book bag and his bat bag in every class, like obsessed with baseball, had a batting cage next to his house. He smashed his bats and never touched a Major League Baseball bat again. And he played softball, some charity softball games and stuff. But he literally gave up that dream. And as the story goes, and I talked to one of his high school friends who was also in the minors, who he stayed with that night before, he went home, smashed the bats, and the next morning began giving every single ounce of his life to wrestling, which is unbelievable. I mean, most people just bang on that regret for, you'll lose 5 years regretting your baseball career dying. And he just went, 100% into wrestling.
Yeah, it was that next day, like you said, it's okay, I'm going to go this direction now. Like
he never looked back. I mean, how many people actually do that? Maybe they coach for a while. They go try to play in, what if it's baseball, they try to play in the Dominican, like whatever the thing is that you were dreaming of or someone else was that, we all did at maybe 22, 23. You usually kind of transition. And he was just like, I am done. And
cut it off immediately.
That to me was one of the most, once I read and researched and talked to enough, of his minor league teammates and coaches about how dedicated he was and how singularly focused he was on baseball, it almost was like knowing that version of Randy at 23. It was almost like, wait a minute, you really just let it go? Like, wow,
But on the other flip side of that, with the obsessive compulsive side of things and everything, it also explains why he was as successful as he was.
Yeah. Well, he mapped it out. That's why I was saying the baseball, he would study pitchers. He was one of the, he was really smart. I think people from a you see the character, but behind the sunglasses, and use the cliche, behind the sunglasses and all the charisma and all the neon colors, he was an honor student in high school. He was, by a couple different accounts, like a laser sharp like poker player. He could just destroy. Like Lanny has a great line, which he told me, and I think he even said in one of the documentaries, that like Randy didn't get a big signing bonus or like one of the bonus babies or anything like that. But he got the money anyway in cards. Like he said that Angelo never had to send him money on the road, because he was only making like $200 a week or something, because he would just clean out all the bonus babies in poker. He ended up having all their money anyway, and funded his own minor league career by doing that. Hacksaw Jim Duggan said he was like a brilliant chess player, and Hacksaw was like, I was a really good chess player, and Randy was one of the only guys on the plane or in the locker room who could beat me. So this was a very calculating, smart man who created the Macho Man, not out of just like luck, but like out of a clear path to becoming a star.
Yeah, and in all defense with Hacksaw, because I love Hacksaw, text occasionally with him still, but he was good at chess, but he got cleaned out cards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, who do we
really
want to
funny.
play with? Hacksaw, come on over. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
one of
it's
those
really
guys.
funny, those guys. Yeah, they all had, and what's funny too, again, another thing that is like a clear break. And this was for the most, I think later, I've seen some research later that Randy went back into it, but in the beginning, when he got called up to WWE and there was the Greyhound buses and all that, he wouldn't play cards with the WWE guys. Like he didn't want to fraternize in that way with some of them. And so like Paul Orndorff's son and a couple other people were saying how he was very much to himself. So it's funny when he created that, and his high school friends all call it the new guy. When he created the new guy, which is the Macho Man character, he really let go of some of the things that he enjoyed, even poker for baseball. I know he played gin later and some other things once he was really well established, but for that middle period where he was on the come up in the WWE, he didn't do a lot of that stuff.
Exactly. But the book is definitely a good read. But I'm curious to know, as a sports guy as well, what was it like for you to be endorsed by guys like Tony Dungy, Kevin Durant, Mark Cuban, and guys I get with some of the other projects you did?
Oh yeah, some of the other books that I wrote. It's awesome. Especially the Tony Dungy one really mattered because you're referring to I wrote a biography on Charlie Ward, who is one of my, I try to find like one of one people. I think Macho is a one of one person with with baseball and wrestling and the kind of character he created. And Charlie Ward is a one of one, I don't think we'll ever see, I know we won't ever see anyone accomplish, especially with NIL and everything, what he accomplished. And for anyone
two-sport athlete, all that fun stuff.
Won Heisman Trophy with Florida State, won a national championship as a quarterback at Florida State, took the basketball team to the Elite Eight, gets drafted in the NBA, and then actually plays starting point guard in the NBA Finals. I'm pretty confident in saying we will not see another Heisman Trophy winning quarterback win a national championship and then play point guard in the NBA Finals. I think it's safe to say that, especially now with NIL, there's so much money to do the two sports, but quarterback we never see. Sometimes we see a football player playing outfield or based on speed, but he ran both teams. And so I interviewed Tony for that book, and also I interviewed Jeff Van Gundy and all the Florida State players and all those guys. And so to have it out, when you write a book, you send advanced copies and things to certain people, and they don't have to. They're probably not, if they're friendly with Charlie or whoever you're writing the book on, they're probably not going to say a negative thing, but they also don't have to endorse the book. So when someone like Tony writes, I can't remember what he wrote, it was really great. It was like, this is for a great book for a great person or something along those lines. It feels great. And, I did a book on fatherhood where Mark Cuban, really embraced it, which is really cool. And when you get that it's really a pat on the back because books are very solitary and you're writing them by yourself. And I try to take my kids on like the research road trips and watch some videos of what I'm doing, especially with my son and Macho Man, which is like having a whole second childhood with the rest. It was just awesome. But when someone of those statures, Jerry Jones endorsed a book of mine in the past. Spike Lee, you mentioned, endorsed my book with Nate Robinson. Like, it feels great. You're being sort of, they use that term of like they're recognizing what your hard work is. And I think for anyone who puts anything into the world, your podcast or whatever people do, it's great when someone of note is like, great job. And I think this is really good and you should read it too.
So what's next?
I can't talk about what's next for the moment, but I'll suffice to say that people who would be interested and intrigued by a Macho Man book will be into this book, and I will come on. I'll come on next time. Hopefully, probably like, I don't know, the lead time's long. Next Christmas, we can talk about my next book.
So I'll have the presents ready then.
There you go. Perfect.
So, like I said, it's on Amazon. All that for pre-order. John, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, Friday fans. We know how much you enjoy the movies. Enjoy grabbing your Friday merchandise and interacting with the Friday family, whether it be at conventions or during our particular watch-alongs. Well, when you're looking to get yourself masks, why not check out our friends over at Camp Blood Customs out of New York State, and order your specific custom mask from any of the films. All orders are made specifically. Your needs and wants are. Make sure you find Camp Blood Customs on Facebook, Instagram, and all over social media and order yours today.
Hello, wrestling fans. This is Lanny Poffo, formerly the genius of WWE. You are listening to Crazy Train Radio. Ooh, yeah.